Well, this week, a few of DC's books seem to be losing focus on their main characters and might even be losing me as a reader as a result. Hey, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues Weekly, where I talk about DC Comics 1 week after their release on the Ultra tier of the DC Universe Infinite subscription service. In each installment, I pick an assortment of comics to talk about as a DC fan and also explore what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, full spoilers for everything that I talk about. That's your first and only warning. Right now, we're taking a look at comics originally released to the Ultra tier on March 26th, 2025, with an original publishing date of February 26th, 2025. None of the books this week really had like a big moment that stood out to me as a fan or from a standpoint of themes that they are diving into that I really wanted to dissect. So it's maybe going to feel comparatively like a rapid fire commenting on each of these things. First up, Green Lantern number 20. We've got the Green Lantern still going out and trying to bring into some kind of control the emanations, the manifestations of the emotional spectrum that are happening all over the place. As a result, the story is split up a bit between Hal Jordan and Kyle Rayner, with the story following Hal Jordan at first actually focusing on how this villain was made. And in one story, this villain seems to be made and then done away with. And he even has like a title for that story to that effect. And I really want to be inside the head of my hero and what drives them and what it will cost them to not succeed at what they're trying to succeed at. All of that kind of stuff is what really helps me be pulled into a story. And even though Green Lantern is my favorite comic book hero concept, I could not be much less interested in this book. Now, they did kind of like appeal to me as a longtime reader by having half of the story also focus on Kyle Rayner, who is joined by Con-El, or the 90s Superboy, who's now more back in his leather jacket look than in his more kind of mature Jeff Johns Titans era Superboy look. I guess there's something about that I kind of enjoy, and it was a fun enough story, but I would still rather leave this bouncing around to multiple GLs to the new Green Lantern core book and have Green Lantern focus on one Green Lantern. So anyway, those are all my thoughts on the number 20 of Green Lantern. Flash 18, I'm still not connecting with this story. It's been... The art has gotten recently kind of cartoony. The tone of the story has become more light and kind of flippant, I guess, or inconsequential. And in this story, it's really focused on anybody but the Flash. Yes, the Flash is in it, but he is like just appearing as a guest star in a few scenes. Instead, the story focuses on the perspective of his son, his son's dog. We've got a whole lot of monologuing from Eclipso, and I'm just like, where's the Flash? Please get me into Wally's head and help me to care about what is going on through him. I like the idea that Flash, as a book, when it's focusing on Wally West, features the fact that he has a family. But I don't want the Flash book to be about the Flash's family. I want it to be about the Flash as a family man superhero. I think that's great as a concept, but I want the focus to be on the Flash. Whether that's Wally in the book or Barry, I don't care. Focus on the hero. And the Flash, man, one of my favorite superhero concepts and one of the books I've historically been most likely to stay on board with. And it's losing me. It's losing me again. In the last 5 years, it's been... I love Jeremy Adams stuff, but like apart from that, man. All right, so that was, again, Flash number 18. Batman the Long Halloween, the last Halloween, number... What is this? Number 5. This one... I think they have been trying to honor Tim Sale with this story. It's still written by Jeff Loeb, who wrote Long Halloween Part 1 and 2, whatever those things were called. And so this third full installment of the Long Halloween series, because Tim Sale passed away, they opted instead to get a series of artists that were in some way impacted or inspired by Tim Sale, not wanting to go the route of trying to imitate his art. And I can understand to some degree why they would maybe want to do that. Maybe the concern is that fans are going to be disappointed if it's just kind of like what feels like a knockoff to them. Or maybe they, out of respect in some way, they're not trying to emulate what he did. I don't know. But I think that this is the wrong way to go, to make a story that ultimately is going to be for fans. If you just want to make this story internally and it's just for artists that knew Tim Sale and writers that knew Tim Sale, and maybe a little bit outside of the internal sphere for like hardcore fans that are really following creators, both visually and both artists and writers, then I think maybe this is a choice that can resonate with them. I am not that closely dialed into writers and especially not to artists. I just want a continuation of the feel of the Long Halloween series. And at this point, and this happened in a previous issue as well, but now it definitely seems like they are going off the rails from Tim Sale's style. They're using Tim Sale art for each of the covers, but make no mistake, it's visually looking very different on the inside, feeling like a very different book. And I am wondering whether or not I'm even going to finish The Last Halloween as a series. That's how I'm feeling with issue 5 anyway. Superman 23, this is wrapping up the story of, bringing Doomsday back. Lois Lane still has Superman's powers, which was revealed at the end of a previous issue, was stolen from Zod as part of the whole absolute power ending where powers got swapped all over the DC universe. Well, she's got Zod's. Zod doesn't know why his powers are gone, but he's trying to maintain control over his position, flying off in some fleet somewhere, commanding it, I suppose. And that's just a little nugget, that we're just getting little nuggets at the end of these recent Superman issues of what's going on with Zod, now that they've revealed that that's where Lois got her powers. Well, I'm ready to fast forward at this point to Zod coming back and us dealing with that. This story kind of petered out. We got the revelation that the Time Trapper, who in the past has had different explanations of who he is. At one point, he was Vandal Savage, and I think maybe he had there was another reveal at another point. But every time they kind of like reboot continuity, I think it's a fresh start for the Time Trapper, and who he is could be anybody's guess. Well, it turned out in a recent issue of Superman that it's Doomsday, this future version of Doomsday that's like highly evolved, so he's not bulky anymore, he's more thin, and it's certainly intelligent, and that revelation, I don't know, it's fallen short for me a little bit. And then the way that they dealt with Doomsday this time was to transport him and some other folks that were being bad into one of Brainiac's bottle cities to shrink him way down. And I guess time is also slowed down while he's in the bottle, so that is keeping him out of trouble. The reasoning being, they say, that if Brainiac's bottled cities can contain Kryptonians and Zarnians, which is Lobo's race, then they can contain Doomsday. I'm not sure if that logic holds. Lobo, though he has incredible regenerative powers, and Zarnians all do, that doesn't mean that he's offensively as powerful. So, not being able to hold a Zarnian, I don't know if that means all that much. And being able to hold Kryptonians, well, these are Kryptonians that are being kept under a simulated red sun, so they don't even have their powers. So this isn't a very satisfying move to me. I think the way they're maybe justifying it is mentioning that time is slowed down. And then Lois responds by saying, well, if he dies while he's in there and time is slowed down, what does that mean for his resurrected form? Because every time Doomsday dies, he comes back further evolved to deal with whatever it was, the conditions that killed him. So I think the idea there is if he comes back, wow, is that going to mean he's going to have like multiplied super speed abilities that Superman is just not going to be able to deal with? I don't know. But either way, the way that they dealt with him, even though it kind of gave Lex Luthor a moment to shine, it wasn't very satisfying to me. This whole story kind of ended with a whimper. I'm still interested in where things are going to go with Lois's powers. Obviously, she's eventually going to have to shed them, probably get them back to Zod, and then Zod will have to be dealt with. But I'm interested in just kind of moving on with that story. So this did not end in a super satisfying way, no pun intended, and that's Superman 23. Green Arrow 21, somewhat ironically, was one of the comics I enjoyed more this week. Somewhat ironically because, yeah, I can pick up on some of the I don't know. I guess it's not really strong left-leaning messaging, but there's a little bit of that. But I mean, like, not much more than your average DC comic book these days. So, but the thing that Green Arrow really did for me that so many other books failed to do this week was focused on Green Arrow, focused on Oliver Queen, gave him an interesting moral dilemma that I don't think they're going to do what I want them to do with it, but at least it's an opportunity. There's this, in the backdrop of this story, there is a town that because of a chemical leak from a company called Horton Chemical, all these people are suffering from these horrible conditions. Children are being born with deformities. People are having seizures and all kinds of debilitating things are happening to them. It's just horrible. And this whole community is wanting to get help that the government is not giving them and that Horton Chemical is not giving them. And so that puts Green Arrow kind of in the position of trying to get to the bottom of this and, hopefully in the end being able to help these people in some way. But he's trying to get behind the mystery of all this. Well, one of the big revelations here is that his signature is on some key documents that resulted in these chemical leaks. Because for a very brief period of time, Oliver Queen was the CEO of this company. I can't remember the details, but it was kind of like an interim filling in while they were in a transition. Very briefly, he was head of this company. And when he sees these papers, he's like, I would not have signed this. I don't know what is going on with this document. I would not have signed this. I am hoping that he did sign them, that it's not a forgery, that there was maybe something going on in his life, maybe some crazy cosmic superhero thing so that we could kind of understand why he would have been distracted. Maybe he was trusting the wrong right-hand man at that time to vet these papers before handing him one after the other to sign and stuff like that. But I think it would be cool if he had this really kind of somewhat understandable moral failing. I say somewhat understandable because even though we don't all own companies and we haven't signed things that have had this kind of dramatic effect on the lives of other people, I think on some level we can all relate to having a lot of stuff going on and some things, responsibilities, tasks, whatever, slipping through the cracks in a way that had a negative effect on others. That, like, yes, it's kind of understandable, but at the same time, we did drop the ball, and that is on us. And so this would be an opportunity for them to give this character a moral failing that he's haunted by that wouldn't, I don't think, damage him as a hero. Because I think this kind of mistake, if we find out that it's in a relatable context of who knows what was distracting him, I don't think it's going to tarnish him as a hero, but it could haunt him as a hero. And with Green Arrow being so driven to stand up for the little guy, to have made this kind of error that had so many horrible effects on so many disadvantaged people, I think could be a really interesting thing for his character, for him to wrestle with and figure out, how do I move forward from here when I've made this huge failing? I dropped the ball in such a big way for the people that I'm fighting for. I think that would be so interesting. I have the feeling they're not going to be willing to do that. And part of that may be because, when there's moral failing, we have to figure out, okay, how are we going to deal with forgiveness or redemption and things like that? And outside of, obviously I'm biased coming from a Christian perspective, but the ideas of forgiveness, redemption are just not handled in satisfying ways outside of what Christ has done on the cross. And of course, I don't think they're going to be leaning on that. And so what do? You have to make it so that your heroes actually didn't fail all that badly, because we don't have a way outside. And they're certainly, they're not going to bring Christian theology into this. And so I think it's much more likely that they're going to say, no, it just seems like he really failed morally, but he didn't. So that's where I think it's going to go. But we'll see. I'm still at least engaged in this because it's focused on Oliver Queen and dealing with some of his own, things that drive him and feeling some degree of responsibility, at least for this situation. So on a character level, some interesting stuff happening in Green Arrow 21 and the story that it's a part of. Then we've got Batman and Detective Comics 1094. This one, they're still trying to get to the bottom of these kids that are kind of being like, I can't remember if they're being like abused or what's going on, but like some bad stuff is happening to kids. I think some of them are dying too. And this is all in the context of that company that's come up with a youthaning cocktail that they're experimenting with that Bruce benefited from as kind of like a friend of the one who owns this company. Well, anyway, he's still trying to get to the bottom of this, and part of the story to that end involves him sending Damian Wayne, his son, into a juvenile detention facility to try and see, what might be going on there that would be suspect. Well, yeah, there's definitely some more than suspect things going on. These kids are being abused, and they're there just for punishment, not for reform, not to prepare them to get out of juvenile hall. It's just a really bad situation, and probably an exaggerated version of the way some juvenile halls are run, unfortunately. I think it's got some interesting things going on there. The thing that resonated with me the most was when Bruce realized that things had gone off the rails, that Damian, to defend the lives, or the safety, I should say at least, of these other kids, kind of took a fall, allowed himself to be taken into a room and abused, tortured in some way. I don't know. They don't get specifics, but like certainly offering himself up as kind of like a sacrifice to protect the other kids. Well, Batman comes in there, and of course Damian could break himself out at any time. But Batman comes in there and says the mission's over. And Damian's like, the mission, it's the end of the first day. You wanted me in here for 4 days. And he said, yeah, but you're my son, and I'm not leaving you in here a moment longer. And so that was kind of a cool, anytime there's those kind of connecting moments, those father-son moments between Bruce and Damian, that's in the midst of the otherwise hard and calloused dysfunctional relationship between the two of them. I'm always a sucker for those kinds of moments, and so at least that kind of stood out to me, and I do remain curious as to where this story will go. So that's Detective Comics 1094. Then finally, we've got Black Canary, best of the best of these books. This is certainly the one I have been the most consistently interested in, as Black Canary's knockdown, drag-out bout with Lady Shiva to determine who is the best human hand-to-hand combatant in the DC universe. That is still running through all of these issues, but of course they're using lots of flashbacks in the midst of these punches and kicks and stuff to remind us of how these characters came to be here, stuff about Black Canary's backstory. The flashbacks in particular this time dealt with how she first met Oliver Queen, who eventually they, would be a long-term item, would eventually become married. And so that was kind of neat to get some of that backdrop. They move Black Canary a step toward, and I hate to use this phrase because I think these kinds of phrases, they conjure up different ideas to different people. But I suppose maybe someone would say girl boss. And by that, I assume is meant a female lead character who really has no flaws, no character arc. She's just awesome from beginning to end. I think maybe the Brit something? What's her name? Captain Marvel, the MCU movie Captain Marvel, and the actress lady, I feel like her name sounds something like Brit, but I can't remember. Anyway, that would be, in my mind, an example of what I'm talking about here. I'm wondering if they were doing that a little bit in this issue, because when Green Arrow meets up in the origin story with Ted Grant, who was the Black Cat, or Wildcat from the JSA. He comes to meet with Wildcat to do some training. And Wildcat, Ted Grant, introduces the two of them to each other. And Green Arrow's Ollie was like, wait a minute. Because Ted Grant says, you're going to spar with Black Canary. And he's like, I came to train from you, not play around with your student. And Ted Grant at this point says, oh, there's been some kind of a misunderstanding. Black Canary is not my student. She's my teacher. And then she decks Green Arrow, and he's got a lot to learn and stuff like that. So the issue I have with this is that it has been established and mentioned numerous times that Dinah Laurel Lance, Black Canary 2, the daughter of the original Black Canary, who was a member of the Justice Society, she grew up around the Justice Society, the original Justice Society members, and has said, and I remember this from like issues of JSA, her kind of talking about this, or maybe it was like Birds of Prey where she talked about this, but like she grew up around these guys in the JSA. They're all like uncles to her. She learned how to fight from them, and especially from Ted Grant, Wildcat. And so if this is her origin story, and if this is part of her origin story, her early years, and at this point she is Ted Grant's teacher, then that is a retcon, potentially, of that whole idea. And I'm not interested in that. The thing that I like about a hero is their journey to grow. And Black Canary, just the way she was being brutally trained by her mother to get ready for this bout, was showing, at least in the recent past, that she is still growing. She is still being pushed. Her mother is a big part of that. There's a neat dynamic there too, because I think what's at the bottom of a lot of what we're going to find out is driving Dinah, Black Canary, is her love for her mother and not wanting to see her mother die. And I like that as a motivation, but I still want some sense of growth. And so I'm like, wait a minute, if she's Ted Grant's teacher, if she's the one who taught him how to box, well, that doesn't make any sense. Because he's so much older than her, and he was boxing. He was the boxing champion of the world while she was still in diapers, I think. That doesn't make any sense. So is this a retcon? Here's what I'm thinking and hoping. Here's what I am choosing to believe, because I just don't like the idea of her being Ted Grant's teacher instead of the other way around. My operating theory is that she was taught by Ted Grant. She was taught by the other members of the JSA. But at some point, when she became ready to start her career as a Black Canary, she had gotten to the point from learning from all the members of the JSA, from Ted Grant, probably from traveling around, even though she wouldn't have trained with Lady Shiva. Maybe she'd traveled around to other martial artists, but she'd grown at this point, and Ted Grant had aged enough at this point that her ability was able to eclipse his, especially if we allow for this not to be limited to boxing. If this is mixed martial arts, then I can easily see her besting Ted Grant. But if we're just talking about boxing and they're sparring in a boxing ring and it looks like they're just focusing on boxing moves, I struggle a little bit with the idea of Black Canary being a better boxer than Ted Grant. I don't really like that. It seems like I may have to at least concede that, unless when he says that she's my teacher, he's referring specifically to the fact that she's maybe teaching him some mixed martial arts stuff. And in that sense, he is learning from her, even as she is still maybe capable of learning things from him. So that remark, I didn't like it at a glance. I've had to work through it. But I think at the end of the day, I can still view this the way that I want to. And it was nice to get a little dip back into the beginning of their relationship, which was very much starting out at each other's throats or at each other's fists, or I don't know what the expression would be. But their relationship has always been rocky. And so to see it start out the way that it did here, I like this kind of a presentation of how they met. And then we see Black Canary defeat Lady Shiva. The fight is until one of them says, "I surrender." And Lady Shiva, at the coaxing of Black Canary, who was really beating her down this issue, she like twice almost got out, and then she got as far as "I surrender" to the D, and then Canary punched her again to cut her off. And presumably this is so that Canary can make good on the deal she made to fall during a certain round in order to get the money that will pay for her mom's recovery. But then again, she was also being offered something else by someone else to win the fight. I can't remember. I think it's still interesting how it's going to play out. I'm less interested in like finding out which route she's going to go, and more interested in finding out what is going to be the statement at the end of this miniseries about who the best hand-to-hand martial artist is in the DC universe. Based on how this went, it looks like a person could walk away and say, well, Shiva tried to surrender. And so that says to us as readers that Shiva lost, whatever comes after this, Shiva tried to abandon ship, and the fight only continued because Canary wanted it to continue. I don't like that. I want it to be more left up in the air as to which one of them is the best. And maybe they'll find a way to recover that sense for me. But like Lady Shiva, and I've said this in a recent segment talking about this series, In my mind, she's good for one thing in the DC universe, and that is being the best hand-to-hand martial artist. When you want to show how good somebody is at martial arts, then you have them fight Lady Shiva and survive. Or you fight them Lady Shiva, and at best, you have them fight her to a standstill. The one exception before this point that I'm aware of is Lady Shiva's own daughter, Cassandra Cain, aka Batgirl, defeating her. But also being defeated by her. So there was kind of a little bit of a back and forth. And I need something to, at the end of this, hold Lady Shiva up there, because otherwise I'm like, what purpose does she serve in the DC universe except to be that kind of threat, that kind of a measuring stick for other martial artists? So we will see, and we'll see if they lean more into the quote-unquote girl boss direction, or if we get more of a sense of character growth. She's struggling. Canary is struggling, I think, unless we find out that this is all an act and she's just way better than Shiva, which I would dislike. So I've really been enjoying this because of how much it's been leaning into character and making me just appreciate Black Canary in new ways. But this potential shift, I should say, may take things in this story in a direction that I'm not a fan of. We'll just have to see how it plays out. This is how many? Black Canary... What? It just says best of the best. 4 out of, I would guess, maybe 6. We'll see. But I think those are all... not all of my thoughts. The ring selection this week is the black ring, just representing feeling just kind of a flat line about these comics this week. Some of them, I think, have indications that they're going to go in a direction I might like more. But right now, I just read these comics, and most of them were just kind of there and not really memorable for me at all. Okay, and I think those are all of my thoughts on comic books for now. As always, I love to get your thoughts about any comics I talk about here, any comics I haven't talked about. You can leave those in the comments below. Then go check out christiangeekcentral.com, where you can get this content as a monthly podcast gathered together if you want to listen to it that way. You can get the weekly Christian Geek Central podcast if you want. Tons more content made for you there as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.